The rain had been falling in relentless sheets all morning, turning the winding roads of Vermont's Green Mountains into slick, twisting ribbons of danger. The air smelled of wet pine and something faintly metallic like iron in blood. I glanced at the rear-view mirror. Mom, sitting in the passenger seat, was humming along to a cheerful country song, completely unaware of the dread tightening in my chest. Dad was focused on the road ahead, his knuckles white around the steering wheel, the hum of the heater barely masking the tension in the car. I had spent weeks planning this trip, my gift to them for their 25th wedding anniversary. The destination was a secluded cabin deep in the mountains, a place no one else knew about. My younger brother, Ethan, and I were the only ones in on the secret. Everything was supposed to be perfect, except that nothing ever goes as planned. We had been driving for nearly 6 hours, the car cutting through foggy forests and deserted towns that looked like they hadn't changed since the 1950s. The GPS signal kept flickering, but I didn't think much of it. Mountain roads are notorious for dead zones. Then it appeared. A tunnel carved into the mountainside, dark and narrow, as if the forest itself had swallowed it whole. Dad slowed the car and turned on the headlights. The beam barely pierced the darkness. As we entered, the walls seemed to close in. The hum of the engine felt deafening, and then the first rock fell. It smashed against the asphalt mere feet ahead of us. Dad slammed on the brakes, the tires squealing. My heart jumped into my throat. Another rock bounced off the guardrail, then another. I screamed. Mom gasped. Ethan's small hands gripped the seat tightly, his knuckles pale. Somehow, by some miracle, we avoided being crushed. We pulled over at the nearest safe spot, breathing hard. Dad wiped his forehead. "Everyone okay?" he asked, voice strained. I think so," I managed, still trembling. We sat there for a few minutes, staring at the tunnel, our minds trying and failing to make sense of what had just happened. And then I noticed something off. A woman, standing at the far end of the tunnel, motionless. She wore a simple gray dress, soaking wet, her hair plastered to her face. I blinked, and she was gone. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Dad shook his head. "See what?" I hesitated. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it wasn't. But the look on Ethan's face told me he had seen it too. We decided to continue the trip, trying to shake off the unease. But the road seemed endless. The trees were unnaturally tall, casting shadows that moved as if alive. Every mile marker we passed seemed wrong. First, it said 28 miles to Rutledge, then 280, then back to 28. I tried explaining, but Dad just grunted and pressed on, his irritation growing with every twist and turn. Mom tried to comfort us with stories about when she and Dad first met, but her words felt hollow in the oppressive silence of the forest. And then she appeared again, the same woman, this time closer. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale as ash. She raised her hand, pointing down the wrong road, and then vanished. Dad slammed the brakes again, heart hammering. "This is ridiculous. There's no one there." But Ethan wasn't fooled. He whispered, voice trembling. "I think she's trying to tell us something." I looked at the GPS. We hadn't moved, not a single mile. And then the knocking started. Bang, bang, bang. The sound echoed against the car, startling all of us. Dad jumped, gripping the wheel. I leaned forward, peering out the windshield, but no one was there. And that's when I saw him, a tall man, shadowed in the fog, his face obscured by the mist. "You're heading the wrong way," he said, voice eerily calm. "Turn around. This road, it doesn't go where you think it does." Dad's hand tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white. Who are you?" he demanded. The man didn't answer. He just smiled, and in the next moment, he was gone. That's when the forest fell silent. The rain stopped. The world outside the car seemed to freeze. I knew, deep down, that whatever we had stumbled into was far from ordinary, and that our anniversary road trip, the trip meant to be a celebration. had just become a nightmare we couldn't escape. As we pressed forward, the fog closing in around us, I had no idea we were about to learn the true meaning of fear. The fog wasn't just thick, it was alive. It slithered between the trees, curling around the car like a living thing. Every time I blinked, I swore the forest was changing, the same trees bending in impossible ways. Dad drove in silence, jaw tight, eyes darting to the side mirrors, as though expecting something to leap out. Mom's hands were clenched in her lap, and Ethan was shivering, his forehead pressed against the cool window. The road ahead disappeared entirely. The GPS was spinning in circles, showing a path that didn't exist. 28 miles to Rutledge, then 280, then back to 28. Each sign looked the same, but no town came into view. Then, without warning, the woman appeared again. She stood in the middle of the road, her wet gray dress fluttering, as if blown by a wind that didn't exist. Her eyes hollow and empty, locked on mine. Dad slammed the brakes, skidding on the wet asphalt. "Stop the car," he shouted. The car screeched to a halt just inches from her. She tilted her head slowly, almost curiously, then stepped aside, vanished into the fog. I could feel Ethan trembling behind me. "Why is she here? Why is she following us?" he whispered. I didn't have an answer. Then came the sound, a soft whisper, barely audible over the engine hum. At first I thought it was the wind, but then I heard it again, words, urgent and broken. "Don't go. Don't go. Turn back." The hair on my arms stood on end. I turned to look at Dad, but he seemed frozen, staring straight ahead with wide eyes. Mom's cheerful demeanor had vanished completely. The forest had claimed her attention too. The road curved sharply, plunging us into a valley surrounded by jagged cliffs. And there, standing at the edge of the road, was the man, the one from before. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice calm, but carrying an unshakable authority. "This road, it leads to something you can't escape." Dad gunned the engine, trying to drive past him, but the man was gone before. We reached the spot he had been standing. The fog thickened, pressing against the windows. Shadows moved in unnatural ways, bending at angles no tree should bend. Then Ethan screamed. A tree had appeared directly in front of the car, an impossibly huge, gnarled thing, its bark black as coal. But when Dad slammed on the brakes, it vanished. "Dad, we're trapped," I whispered suddenly. The woman appeared again, this time at the passenger side window. Her face was twisted, half of her jaw missing, blood dripping slowly from her mouth. She smiled, showing no teeth, only darkness. I could hear Ethan's shallow breathing. Mom had begun trembling violently, her lips whispering prayers under her breath. Dad's hands gripped the wheel so tightly that his knuckles cracked. The man appeared once more, directly in the middle of the windshield. "Turn around," he said. "There is no escape. They are waiting for you." "Who?" Dad shouted, panic creeping into his voice. The man didn't answer. He just smiled, and again vanished. Then came the knocking on the car window. Bang, 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 bang. Hard, deliberate, deafening. We all jumped. I turned toward Ethan and saw his face. Pale eyes wide with terror. "They're here," he whispered. Mom's scream cut through the fog. The woman's face pressed against the glass, and in that moment, the car door handle rattled violently, as though someone or something was trying to get in. Dad tried to drive, but the car refused to move. The engine roared, but the tires spun uselessly, gripping nothing. It was as if the road itself had vanished, leaving us floating in a gray void. I looked at the rearview mirror and nearly screamed. Reflected in it was not the back seat, but the woman. She sat there, smiling, her empty eyes locked on ours. Something cold and ancient pressed against my mind, whispering in a language I didn't understand. The fog pressed harder. The shadows twisted and grew, and then the lights of the car flickered and went out. The last thing I saw, before the darkness swallowed everything, was the man, standing at the front of the car, arms outstretched. His mouth opened wide, impossibly wide, and the whispering began again. Welcome to the anniversary. The darkness inside the car was absolute. No dashboard lights, no headlights, just a suffocating blackness that pressed against us like a living thing. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Ethan was shaking beside me, clutching my arm. Mom was silently sobbing, her hands pressed over her face. Dad's face was pale, drenched in sweat, eyes darting frantically. Then came the whispering again, soft at first, almost a hiss, then louder, echoing inside the car, as if the fog itself were speaking. They're waiting for you. They've been waiting. I turned my head slowly. There she was, the woman, sitting in the back seat now. Her head tilted unnaturally, jaw hanging halfway off her face, dark blood dripping down her neck and onto the seat. Her eyes, they weren't human. They were hollow, bottomless voids, staring straight into mine. Get out, get out. Ethan whimpered, his tiny hands pressing over his ears. Dad fumbled blindly, trying to start the car again, but the engine sputtered, coughing, then died. The radio flickered on, crackling static and faint whispers that sounded like children screaming. And then the man appeared in the rearview mirror. This time, he was inside the car, standing behind Dad. His presence was crushing, filling every corner with a cold, unnatural weight. You shouldn't have come, he said, voice low, almost a growl. Now you belong to them. I froze. The air felt thick, almost liquid, pressing down on our chests. Mom screamed, a raw, piercing sound, as the woman in the back seat leaned closer, whispering words I couldn't understand, words that crawled under my skin and burrowed into my mind. Something slammed into the roof of the car, hard, over and over. I grabbed Ethan and pulled him close, trying to block the sound. But no matter how loud we screamed, no one could hear us outside. Outside, did anything even exist? The fog outside the windows started to writhe, forming shapes. Trees bent at impossible angles, their branches like skeletal hands reaching for us. Shadows moved, flitting in ways that defied physics. And then the car door handle rattled violently. Someone or something was trying to get in. Dad shouted, panic rising in his voice. Hold on, we're leaving. But the car wouldn't move. The fog had claimed the road. The tires spun, gripping nothing but a gray void. The engine died completely. I looked at the rearview mirror again. The man was smiling, impossibly wide, eyes glowing faintly red in the darkness. This is your anniversary, your special day, forever. Mom screamed again, and suddenly I realized the woman's jaw was moving, even though she wasn't speaking. Blood poured from her mouth, dripping onto the seat. Words formed in the blood as it slid down, turn back, turn back, turn back. But it was too late. The fog shifted violently, and the car lurched forward on its own, driving us deeper into the forest. The road had returned, but it wasn't the road we knew. Trees grew impossibly close, the sky overhead gone. The headlights illuminated something in the distance, an abandoned cabin, illuminated by a sickly green light. Dad, we have to stop, I whispered, but my voice felt distant, swallowed by the fog. As we approached, I saw figures standing around the cabin, dozens of them, shadowy shapes, humanoid but wrong, limbs bent in ways no human limbs should bend, eyes glowing red, and they were all staring at us. The car skidded to a halt just outside the cabin. The engine died again, and that's when the whispering turned into laughter. High, terrible laughter that echoed across the forest, bouncing off the trees surrounding us. The man appeared at the driver's side window, hand tapping slowly, deliberately, against the glass. Come in, it's your anniversary. Dad's face was pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Mom was frozen in place. Ethan was shaking uncontrollably. And I didn't move. I couldn't. Something inside me was frozen with fear. paralyzed by the certainty that stepping outside the car would be the end. Then the door handle of the passenger's side rattled, slow, methodical, and the woman whispered, almost lovingly, "You belong here. With us. Forever." The car shuddered, the fog pressing harder. I realized, with a sudden, sickening clarity, that we were trapped in a place that wasn't a place at all. Somewhere between life and something else. The cabin door creaked open. The fog pressed against the car like a living wall, muffling all sound except for the sinister whispers that crept along the edges of my mind. The cabin loomed ahead, its sickly green light pulsing slowly, like a heartbeat. The closer we got, the more unnatural the air felt, heavy, cold, and thick with the smell of decay. Dad's hands shook as he gripped the steering wheel. We can't go in there," he whispered, voice breaking. But the tires spun on their own, moving the car forward as if an unseen force had taken control. Mom clutched Ethan to her chest, rocking back and forth silently. Ethan's eyes were wide, reflecting the green light from the cabin. "Why? Why won't it stop?" he asked in a trembling voice. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that the forest, the fog, the figures, everything was alive, feeding on our fear. The car came to a stop just in front of the cabin. The front door creaked open slowly, revealing shadows moving inside. They weren't human. Limbs twisted and elongated, faces stretched into impossible shapes. And they were all staring directly at us. The man appeared at the driver's side window. Again. This time, his eyes glowed a deep crimson, almost hypnotic. "You can't leave," he said. "This is your anniversary. You're forever." Dad tried to speak, but his voice was gone. Mom's lips moved, silent prayers forming as she pressed Ethan tighter against her chest. I could feel my own heartbeat pounding so hard, I thought the fog would swallow it whole. Then the woman appeared closer now, her face inches from the car window. Her jawless mouth moved, whispering words that burned into my brain. "Step out. Join us. You can't run." The car doors unlocked on their own. The handles rattled violently, demanding we open them. I screamed at my parents, "Don't get out." But even as I spoke, Dad's hands lifted slowly toward the door. His movements weren't his own. Something had taken control of him, pulling him toward the cabin. I grabbed his arm with all my strength. He looked at me with hollow eyes, then shook violently, as if struggling against an invisible force. "Get out," the woman whispered, her voice everywhere at once, echoing through the fog and inside our heads. Ethan whimpered, tiny fingers clutching mine. "I don't want to." "Go," he said. "I know, buddy. I know," I whispered back, trying to keep my own fear from consuming me. Suddenly, the ground beneath the car shuddered. The fog swirled violently, and the figures outside the cabin began to move faster, gliding silently, limbs bending in impossible directions. The shadows pressed closer, as if the forest itself was alive and closing in on us. Dad screamed a raw, terrified sound, but it wasn't his voice alone. There were whispers layered over it, hundreds of voices screaming at once, all speaking the same chilling command. "Join us. It's your anniversary." The cabin door opened wider, revealing a darkness so thick it seemed to swallow the light. From within, shapes moved. One of them stepped forward, a figure that was both man and woman, twisted together in ways no human body should allow. Its eyes burned with a crimson fire, and it smiled, revealing rows of jagged teeth that glimmered wetly in the green light. I knew then, this place didn't want us to leave. This forest didn't just feed on fear, it trapped it, consuming anyone foolish enough to enter its domain. I grabbed Mom and Ethan, pulling them back, trying to start the car. The engine roared to life as if waking from a nightmare, and the shadows recoiled slightly. But before we could drive away, the woman's face pressed against the windshield, her jawless mouth opening impossibly wide. A scream, not ours, not hers, ripped through the car. The sound rattled our bones, shaking the very air. Then the man appeared in front of the hood. The car skidded to a stop. He raised one hand, pointing at the cabin. His smile widened unnaturally. "This is where it ends," he whispered, and that's when the fog swallowed the cabin entirely. It disappeared. The shadows, the twisted figures, even the green light, they were gone. For a moment, silence. Absolute silence. Then the GPS blinked back on. 28 miles to Rutledge. The road seemed normal again, straight, smooth. The fog had vanished, leaving only the familiar Vermont trees. I looked around. Mom was pale, trembling. Ethan was clutching me tightly. Dad's hands shook on the wheel. None of us spoke. But as we began to drive again, cautiously, I saw it in the rearview mirror. The woman, watching us from the edge of the road, half visible, half vanished, smiling that jawless smile, and I knew, deep down, that this was far from over whatever haunted that cabin, and the forest was now following us, waiting. The forest seemed calm now, almost peaceful, but we all knew better. The silence was unnatural, suffocating. The car hummed along the winding Vermont roads, tires gripping asphalt that should have led us back to Rutledge, but something felt wrong. The GPS spun wildly again. First it showed 28 miles, then 280, then unbelievably 3,000 miles. None of the numbers made sense. Dad squinted at the screen, jaw tight, muttering curses under his breath. I don't understand, he said. This road, it's impossible. Mom gripped Ethan's arm, shaking. Maybe we should just pull over, she whispered. Maybe call for help. I tried my phone. No signal, not even a bar. Every map app, every navigation tool, dead. Like the forest had erased all technology. That's when I saw it. A road sign. Leaning at a sickening angle. Rutledge 5 miles. Then, 10 minutes later, the exact same sign appeared. And then, 5 miles again. It's looping, I whispered, heart racing. We're trapped in a loop. Ethan whimpered behind me. Why won't it stop? Why can't we get out? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I didn't know. And then, movement. Shadows at the edge of the forest, just beyond the headlights. Too many to count. Limbs bent in impossible angles. Faces twisted, staring, grinning. The woman, the man, and others. Creatures I couldn't identify. Dad swerved. What the hell? What are they doing? The shadows mirrored our movements. Every swerve, every turn, they mirrored it, gliding silently, encircling the car. The road beneath us seemed to stretch unnaturally, as though the forest itself was bending reality. Then Ethan screamed. A figure appeared inside the car, sitting in the back seat where no one should be. It was her, the woman, jawless, blood dripping, eyes empty. She didn't move, but her presence pressed on me like an iron weight. You can't leave, she whispered directly into my mind. You belong here, forever. Dad panicked, throwing the car into reverse. The shadows outside vanished. The fog thickened again, wrapping the car like wet cloth. The road disappeared. Then came the laughter, high-pitched, terrifying. Children's laughter, layered over adult voices, echoing in every direction. The forest seemed alive now. Branches scraped the car windows, clawing, reaching for us. The GPS blinked again. This time it read, "Home 0 miles." A chill ran down my spine. Home. But this wasn't home. None of us had seen our house yet. The forest was mocking us. Mom clutched Ethan. We should have never come here, she whispered. Maybe it's punishment, Dad muttered. For what? For celebrating. A sudden pounding on the roof of the car made all of us jump. Bang, bang, bang. Hard, violent, impossible. The car rattled violently. The fog parted slightly, and I saw them dozens of figures, faceless, twisted, surrounding the car. The man and woman at the forefront. their hands outstretched as if commanding the rest. The whispers turned into voices now, hundreds speaking at once. Anniversary, forever, belong, forever. I tried to start the car. Nothing. The engine refused to turn over. Every door rattled violently. The shadows pressed closer, and then, as if mocking us, the road reappeared in front of us. The car lurched forward, tires gripping the asphalt, but it wasn't leading us anywhere familiar. Trees bent impossibly overhead. Shadows danced across the road, and in the distance, another cabin. Dad slammed the brakes. Not again. Not another cabin. The green light pulsed from the distance, sickly and hypnotic, and I knew somehow this was the center of it. Whatever force haunted these mountains had chosen its place to feed, to trap, to claim. The woman appeared in the back seat again, closer than ever, whispering, "You're so close, so very close." The car shuddered violently, and then the headlights revealed a new horror, something massive, crouched in the middle of the road. Not fully human, not fully beast, its glowing red eyes locked onto us. I screamed, Ethan screamed, Mom screamed, and Dad. He slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The creature lunged. The creature's eyes glowed crimson in the headlights. Its form shifting, impossibly tall, limbs bent at wrong angles. It crouched low, like a predator ready to spring, yet moved with unnatural fluidity. Its presence alone pressed against our minds, filling us with a cold, unshakable dread. "Dad, go, go," I screamed, pounding the dashboard. He slammed the gas pedal, tires spinning wildly on the slick asphalt. But the creature didn't move, at least, not at first. Then, in a blink, it lunged. Not like a normal animal, but impossibly fast. Its clawed hand scraped across the hood of the car, denting metal like paper. Mom screamed, covering Ethan's eyes. Ethan buried his face in her chest, shaking uncontrollably. I could feel my own panic threatening to overtake me. The car swerved violently, hitting the shoulder. Branches scraped the windows, sharp and sudden. Shadows twisted across the interior, the fog pressing into our lungs like wet cloth. And then, the woman's voice whispered directly into my mind, "You can't escape. None of you can escape." Dad's face was pale, strained. It's everywhere. Its heat cut off abruptly as the rearview mirror reflected movement behind us. Hundreds of shadowed figures appeared, moving silently, encircling the car. Their eyes glowed faint red, limbs bent impossibly, faces twisted in silent screams. I realized then, this wasn't just one forest creature. The forest itself was alive. Every shadow, every tree, every mist of fog was a part of it. It fed on fear, trapped souls, and now, it had claimed us as its prey. The car lurched over a fallen log, bouncing violently. The creature on the hood screeched a sound that pierced the steel and glass, rattling our bones. Its jaw opened impossibly wide, revealing a hollow abyss instead of teeth. Ethan screamed, clinging to me. Mom's sobs echoed, a haunting chorus in the enclosed space. Dad tried to steer, but the car seemed possessed, moving forward and back, as if the forest controlled it. Suddenly the man appeared, not outside, not in front, but inside the car, standing silently behind Dad. His presence alone froze the air. He smiled that unnerving smile. "Welcome to the anniversary," he said, time distorted. Minutes felt like hours. Every second stretched, every heartbeat thundered like a drum in my skull. Then the creature lunged again. This time, it struck the windshield. Cracks spiderwebbed across the glass, the cold mist from outside seeping in. I could see its jagged form through the broken glass. Its face was wrong, twisted, and I could feel its hunger staring straight at me. The woman leaned closer to my side, her jawless face inches from mine. Her breath smelled of decay. "You're ours. Forever." I slammed my hands on the wheel, trying to control the car. Dad screamed, trying to wrestle control, but it was impossible. The forest bent reality roads, curved impossibly. Shadows danced at impossible angles. The creature's limbs stretched further than physics allowed. Suddenly, the headlights revealed the cabin ahead. The green light pulsed again, hypnotic, calling us. The car veered toward it, as if magnetized. The creature followed, effortlessly gliding over the asphalt, faster than thought. I looked at Ethan. "Hold on," I whispered. "We're not done yet. We have to survive." Mom nodded, but her face was pale as paper, eyes wide with terror. The man stepped forward, blocking the cabin door. "They're waiting for you," he said. And then, almost casually, he vanished. The forest fell eerily silent. The creature crouched on the hood, eyes burning, jaws snapping. The fog thickened behind us, curling like serpents ready to strike. I knew one thing: if we survived this night, it would only be because we faced the forest directly. Hiding would not save us. Running would not save us. And as the car rolled toward the cabin, green light pulsing, shadows twisting, I realized something worse. The anniversary wasn't just a nightmare. It was a trap. And whatever had been waiting here had been waiting for 25 years. The car skidded to a stop in front of the cabin. Its green light pulsed like a heartbeat, sickly and hypnotic. The forest had fallen silent again, but the silence was heavy, suffocating. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward us, waiting, watching. Dad's hands were shaking as he finally cut the engine. Ethan clutched my arm so tightly it hurt. Mom whispered prayers under her breath, voice barely audible. I opened the car door first. The fog pressed against us like a wall, wet and cold, curling around our legs. The air smelled of rot and old pine, a combination that set my stomach churning. The front door of the cabin creaked open by itself. Darkness waited inside, thick and black, swallowing the green light from outside. I could hear something moving within, soft, deliberate steps that didn't belong to anyone human. "Stay together," I whispered, voice trembling. "Whatever this is, we have to stick together." We stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under our weight. The walls were lined with old photographs, twisted and warped. Faces stared at us, eyes red or hollow, some melting into the background, as if they weren't meant to exist. The woman appeared at the end of the hallway, jawless and grinning. Her presence pressed on me like a heavy stone. "Welcome home. The anniversary begins." I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry, paralyzed with fear. Dad moved first, trying to protect us, but the cabin seemed alive. Doors slammed shut. Walls shifted slightly, and the floor beneath us vibrated. Shadows slithered along the edges, forming shapes that mimicked our movements, and then the man appeared. His voice echoed through the cabin, though his lips didn't move. "You cannot leave. This is the center. This is where the forest feeds." I realized then this cabin wasn't just a structure. It was a trap, a beacon for the forest's hunger. The anniversary wasn't about celebration. It was about sacrifice. Ethan whimpered, "I want to go home." "You and me both, buddy," I whispered, trying to keep my fear from swallowing me. Suddenly, the floorboards beneath us creaked violently. One of them broke with a loud snap, and I caught a glimpse of something below a pit, deep and dark, filled with writhing shapes. Faces pressed against the darkness, screaming silently. Mom screamed, grabbing Ethan. Dad's face went pale. We can't stay here," he muttered. Then the woman stepped closer. Her jawless mouth stretched impossibly, and from it came a whispering chorus of voices. "Anniversary, forever. Join us, forever." The shadows in the cabin began to move independently of us. They twisted through the walls, curling around the ceiling, crawling along the floor. The air was thick with cold, and every breath burned our lungs. I realized the only way out was through the cabin, and whatever awaited us inside was waiting for the anniversary feast. A door at the far end of the hallway creaked open. Green light poured from within, pulsating, almost calling us. The man appeared there too, silent, motionless, arms outstretched as if to guide or trap us. Dad swallowed hard. We have no choice. We have to go in. I took a deep breath. Mom clutched Ethan to her chest. We stepped forward together, into the green light, into the center of the cabin, and into whatever nightmare the forest had been preparing for us. The shadows leaned closer. The whispers became screams, and the floor beneath us trembled as if the cabin itself were alive. Then the door slammed shut behind us. We were trapped. The green light from the far door bathed the cabin in an unnatural glow, casting grotesque shadows that stretched and twisted across the walls. Every creak of the floorboards sounded amplified, like a drumbeat announcing our arrival. Mom clutched Ethan, whispering prayers over and over. Dad gripped my shoulder tightly, trying to stay calm, but his eyes betrayed terror deeper than I'd ever seen. Then, from the center of the glowing room, the floor shifted. The boards warped, revealing a pit filled with writhing shapes. Human faces, distorted, pressed against the blackness. Their mouths opened silently, screaming in despair, their eyes pleading for release. The woman appeared first, gliding across the floor without touching it. Her jawless mouth stretched impossibly wide as she whispered directly into our minds. The anniversary, your fear, your blood, our feast, forever. I felt my knees weaken. Ethan buried his face against my chest, whimpering. Mom sobbed, trying to shield him, but the shadows were closing in. The man appeared next, standing perfectly still at the edge of the pit, arms outstretched. His crimson eyes glowed like coals. Suddenly, the shadows began to move violently, rising from the pit, limbs bent at impossible angles, twisting and writhing toward us. The cabin seemed to breathe, walls pulsing, floor trembling. Dad yelled, "We have to move. We have to get out." But the door we came through slammed shut, disappearing entirely. The only exit was the glowing green room ahead. I swallowed my fear and stepped forward, holding Ethan and urging Mom to follow. As we entered the green light, the whispers intensified, layering over one another until it became a deafening chorus. Join us, forever. The anniversary, forever. The room inside was circular, walls lined with grotesque symbols carved deep into the wood. At the center was a pedestal, pulsing with green energy, and on the pedestal, a book, ancient, leather-bound, blood-stained. The man and woman flanked the pedestal, waiting. The shadows circled around us, twisting and writhing, forming shapes that looked almost human, but not quite. I realized then what the forest had been planning. This wasn't just a trap. This was a ritual. A centuries-old ceremony designed to feed on the living and bind them to the forest forever. The woman leaned closer, whispering in my mind, "Your fear, your blood, your souls, forever ours." Dad grabbed my arm, shaking me. "We have to destroy it. We can't let them." Before he could finish, the pedestal erupted in green light. The shadows lunged, crashing into us like waves. I felt cold tendrils wrap around my arms, chest, and legs, pulling me toward the pit. Ethan screamed. Mom screamed. Dad struggled violently, punching and kicking against the unseen force. But it was stronger than any of us. I forced myself to focus, remembering every horror, every warning from the forest. The book, the pedestal. It was the source. If we destroyed it, maybe, just maybe, we could end this nightmare. I lunged for the pedestal, knocking over the book. The green light flared violently, searing my eyes. The shadows shrieked, twisting, in agony. The woman screamed, though no sound came from her jawless mouth, and the man vanished in a burst of crimson light. The cabin trembled violently. The walls cracked, the floor shuddered, and the shadows began to retreat. but not completely. Some lingered, watching, waiting. I grabbed Ethan and Mom. Dad helped us run toward the far end of the room, where another door had appeared. The green light dimmed slightly as we passed. We didn't stop running, not for a second. The forest's whispers still haunted us, trailing us like smoke. This isn't over. The anniversary. Forever. Forever. Outside, the fog had lifted, but the air was cold, unnatural, and heavy. The forest seemed calm, almost as if it had never moved. But deep down, we all knew this wasn't over. The anniversary had claimed victims for centuries, and somehow, it had marked us. The forest seemed quiet now, but the silence was a lie. Every step we took felt heavier than the last, as if invisible hands were pressing down on us, slowing our progress. Dad led the way, gripping the steering wheel tightly as we navigated the winding Vermont roads. But the GPS still flickered with impossible readings, miles that shouldn't exist, roads that twisted back on themselves. The forest was still alive, bending reality, mocking us. "I don't understand," Dad muttered, voice tight. "We should be out by now. This road, it's impossible." Mom clutched Ethan to her chest, rocking him. "It's following us," she whispered, voice trembling. It's not done." I looked around. Shadows flitted just beyond the headlights. Branches scraped the sides of the car, unnaturally, like skeletal fingers. The fog returned in patches, curling in impossible ways, sometimes moving against the wind. Then I saw it, the woman's face, reflected in the rearview mirror, jawless, smiling, blood dripping, hovering behind us. Not in the forest, not in the car, but in our minds. Every thought she whispered clawed at our sanity. "You cannot escape the anniversary. Forever, forever." Ethan whimpered. "I don't want it." I swallowed my fear. "We have to keep moving. We can't stop." The shadows outside multiplied. Figures emerged from the fog, stretching impossibly tall, limbs bending like broken trees. They moved in silence, gliding alongside the car, blocking every possible escape. Then the man appeared at every angle at once, reflected in the mirrors, in the headlights, in the darkness ahead. Crimson eyes glowing, voice echoing in our minds. "You tried to run, but you cannot. The forest marks you. The anniversary follows you." Dad slammed on the brakes. "We have to fight. We cannot let it claim us." But fight was impossible. Every attempt to drive forward met resistance. Tires spun, the road seemed to twist, and the shadows grew stronger, feeding on our fear. The car lurched violently, sending us skidding off the road into the thick trees. The forest closed in immediately. Trees bent toward us, roots rising like serpents to block our path. I tried to start the car again. Jen refused. Mom screamed as Ethan clutched my arm, shaking. "It's everywhere," she whispered. "It's in the trees, the fog. It's inside us." I realized she was right. Every shadow, every whisper, every impossible sight. It was no longer just outside. It had entered us. The anniversary curse had followed us from the cabin, marking us as prey forever. Then, a new horror. The forest around us began to whisper our names. Hundreds of voices layered, twisted, mocking. Not just ours. Neighbors, people long gone from Rutledge, screaming from the darkness. Dad's hands tightened on the wheel. "We have to get to town. Somewhere there's light. Somewhere it can't follow." But the road no longer existed. Asphalt twisted into nothing, trees closing behind us, the shadows pressing from every side. And then, I saw the cabin off, in the distance. Green light pulsing. It shouldn't be there. We had destroyed it, hadn't we? But it was back. And now, it wasn't alone. The forest itself seemed to bleed into it, forming impossible shapes, creatures crawling from tree to cabin, joining the ritual we had fled. The anniversary had not ended. It had followed us. And now, it was stronger, The green light from the cabin stretched across the forest like a wound in reality. The shadows were everywhere, now twisting trees, crawling fog, and creatures that should not exist. The man and woman stood at the center, flanked by countless forms, all pulsing with a hunger older than time. Dad's hands shook on the steering wheel. We can't survive this. I swallowed, gripping the dashboard. We have to try. If we don't, we're done. Mom clutched Ethan tightly, whispering prayers that were swallowed by the forest. But something in the air shifted. The shadows paused, almost waiting, as if curious. Then the cabin's door opened. A violent wind surged out, throwing the car backward. The green light flared, illuminating the creatures in all their grotesque forms, limbs bent at impossible angles, faces missing jaws, eyes glowing crimson, mouths whispering our names. The woman stepped forward, closer than ever, jawless grins stretching impossibly wide. Forever. The anniversary. Yours now. The man's voice boomed in our heads. You cannot escape what has existed for centuries. It feeds. It waits. It owns you. I realized what we had to do. The pedestal. The book. The ritual. We hadn't finished it. The forest's power came from it, from the cabin, from the celebration itself. If we could destroy the source fully, maybe we could end this nightmare. Dad, Mom, Ethan, I shouted. We have to go back, destroy it. They nodded, terror etched into their faces. Together, we ran through the forest, shadows clawing at us, the ground twisting beneath our feet. Trees bent to block us. Branches reached like fingers, tearing at clothing and skin. But we pressed on, driven by sheer desperation. The cabin loomed ahead, larger and more twisted than before. Green light pulsed violently, like a heartbeat in a body of shadows. The pedestal waited in the center, the book open, glowing with malevolent energy. I grabbed the book. The shadows screamed, writhing violently. The woman lunged toward me, jawless mouth stretching impossibly. But Dad and Mom held her back, striking at the shadows, screaming, fighting with everything they had. I slammed the book onto the pedestal. The green light flared, brighter than the sun, searing our eyes. The shadows screamed, twisting, curling into themselves, then evaporating into smoke. The forest trembled violently, the cabin shaking, walls cracking. The man and woman shrieked, their forms distorting, bending, screaming, no, forever, ours, yours forever, and then, silence. The green light vanished, the shadows were gone, the cabin crumbled, collapsing into itself like a dying star. The forest was still, eerily calm, the fog lifted, the twisted trees straightened. We stumbled outside. Ethan cried, clinging to Mom. Dad hugged us all, tears streaming down his face. I looked around, everything seemed normal again. The forest, the road, the world was back to the way it should be. But something lingered. A whisper, faint, almost imperceptible. The anniversary waits. We drove back to Rutledge, exhausted, shaking, and scarred physically and mentally. The town looked normal, mundane, but we knew the truth. Somewhere, deep in the woods, the forest still lived. The anniversary curse might be broken for now, but it would return, for another family, another celebration, another eternity. As we pulled into our driveway, Ethan looked up at me. Will it come back? I swallowed hard. Maybe, but we survived, and that's what matters. The house was quiet, safe, or so it seemed. I knew we would never forget the horrors of that anniversary, and every year, when the calendar turned, the fear would return silent, waiting, patient, because the forest never forgets, and the anniversary never ends.